How you guys doing today?
Doing all right, man. You over the age of 18?
Yes, sir.
All right. Which God do you believe in, brother?
The Christian God.
All right, man. What you got for us? Should I believe in him?
Well, I'm just more interested in the claim. The prompt is there's no evidence for God. I just think that's. Uh, I just don't think it's true. Um,
Cool.
and the reason I would say that is because the way we define evidence is just any piece of data that is going to raise the probability of a proposition being true.
That's the way a lot of people do that. I don't grant that.
hmm
I grant the
Okay.
Oxford Dictionary definition.
Okay. So how would you define evidence?
Evidence, Oxford Dictionary, is going to be facts and information leading to a true conclusion.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
that can go along with
facts.
probability raising if you want to.
Yeah. That's kind of similar to
But
the definition
I
I
mean, there's
gave.
no. So here's why I say this. Anytime someone wants to point out some form of, let's say, empirical evidence for the empirical claim of God making the universe, for instance, nothing
hmm
shows a causal relation to some magical sky unicorn. If someone brings up experience, that is nothing but in their mind, and there's no reason for me to believe it's anything other than
hmm
imagination because there's answers that are more likely in psychology. So I've
Yeah.
never seen any evidence for a God, and if I'm wrong, I would love to see the evidence.
Yeah. So, I mean, like when you're talking about empirical evidence, I totally agree. If we're talking about the empirical claim of the universe existing, then we have to provide some sort of empirical evidence for the origin of the existence of, well, the
I'd say
universe.
eventually,
So,
but like we don't need to have an answer to that.
well, not necessarily we need to have an answer. I'm just
Okay.
saying we need to have some sort of explanation, like to fill any type of PSR.
Um,
And so it doesn't, I'm not even advocating for like maybe a strong PSR, maybe even a weak PSR. Like, even philosophers like Graham Oppy will offer things like, well, he believes there is a original necessary existence of the
Yeah,
universe. He
that's a
doesn't think it's God.
metaphysical claim though. So like there we can have
hmm
metaphysical hypotheses about what it could be. That doesn't make any truth and it doesn't raise any probability at all because there's no justification grounding it at all.
Well, so something, a probability being raised just means it makes it more likely on the proposition. So you propose something,
Yeah, we can
and
we
if
can argue if there's
any
something more likely, but
yeah, so like if there's any type of fact, right, or any type of piece of data that makes something more likely to be true than not, even maybe on the consecutive case it's not, but like just the fact alone, then we have evidence for something. So I would agree that there's evidence for
nah,
atheism.
I don't grant that. Let's say it's
Like,
more likely for germs to have existed before we knew about germ theory or had a microscope. Did it make germs real?
well, I
And was
mean,
there evidence for germs, even though the hypothesis and idea of these tiny microbes being
yeah,
real could have been causing sicknesses? No, we didn't have evidence for it. What we did have was an
uh huh.
imaginative metaphysical framework about a possible causation.
Also, just real quick, sorry to interrupt you guys. Jeannie down in the comments, I hope you can stay for a little bit. If you're interested in Jeannie, we can talk about the supernatural again.
Yeah.
Jeannie is a, yeah.
Yeah, I love talking about the supernatural. I prefer the supernatural over God debates any day. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry for that. What's up? What you got?
Yeah, so when it comes to like back then whenever they didn't know about germ theory and stuff like that, like I would say it's because of a lack of knowledge and information is why they couldn't even make the proposition in the first place. So there was no evidence for the proposition because there was no proposition in the first place.
That's
But
just
if we
not
have a
true. We had
proposition,
ideas, and then we had a microscope.
yeah, well,
But
we had
having the idea
ideas.
is not evidence for it actually being there. It's just an idea of, hey, this is something that it could be. This could be is
hmm
more likely than this could be. There's still no evidence for either of them.
Yeah, those are called, so those are propositions. So once we've had a
Correct.
microscope, we can make a proposition about a fact of the
Once we have
universe.
the microscope, we can find if there's evidence for it.
Exactly. And
Yeah, but
evidence is
there's no
any piece of
evidence
data that's
under
going to
just a
make it more likely.
proposition, which is proven through binary logic. And a syllogism is not even sound unless each individual premise itself has evidence external of itself.
Well, hold on. So really quickly, I'm not, I think you're kind of confusing on what I'm saying. I'm talking about this very, very simply. I am like when it comes to like epistemology and things like that and how we know things to be true.
Sure.
Like I'm very Aristotelian in my view of this. I don't know if
I'm
you are,
ignorant
so that
on
could
that.
be just a discrepancy. Okay,
What is that?
so like Aristotle basically said the way we know things is by sense data.
Sure.
Very simply put. So, like the five senses that we have, or if you want to posit any more senses, is how we can know things, right? So, the word knowledge or gnosis is kind of like archaic in
And
that
I grant
aspect.
it
So,
sometimes. Yeah, I grant a priori, I grant empiricism, I grant
mhm.
phenomenology, I grant them all. We're supposed to use all forms of epistemologies in their respected category.
Okay, okay, perfect, perfect. So, in that respect, I would say that, we have knowledge of things, right? And like knowledge in that respect can actually be false. So, like some people will define knowledge as like justified true belief. I reject that definition. I just don't think that fits. I think belief and knowledge are separate. So, I can believe something and have no justification for it, but I can still psychologically believe in it. So, like from experience that like
You have a
there's even
justification
Christians.
for believing it, though,
Well, yeah, but my
like a
justification might
psychological.
be exactly psychological, right? But maybe not like empirically or evidential justification. Maybe
To
just like
you, it's
psychological.
evidence, which is why you believe it. That's how the brain works. Beliefs aren't choices.
Yeah, I know, but like there's a difference between psychological evidence and epistemic evidence. And so like people might not have epistemic evidence for something, but they might have psychological
That
evidence
I
in that they
grant.
feel a certain way. Okay, great.
That I
Wonderful.
grant.
So we okay, perfect. So when we're talking about beliefs, all beliefs are propositions based on sense data, and we are either affirming or negating or staying agnostic on that specific proposition.
Oh,
Would you agree?
sure. Sure, I can grant that, yeah.
Okay, great. So, let's say we can propose the proposition God exists, right? God does exist, right?
Sure.
As a Christian or as a theist, I would affirm that proposition. And as an atheist, you would negate that proposition. And as
I,
an agnostic, you would just
I would
say,
stay
I don't know.
agnostic on it until there's further on it.
Wait, no,
Yeah.
wait.
So,
So,
Well, I don't want
okay,
to
but what
filibuster.
about
I
a
don't.
truth apt proposition? Right. So most propositions are in fact truth apt. So just like yes or no. So if we follow the like linear logic, right, law of non-excludable middles, agnostic wouldn't be permissible, right? There would be no in between. There would either be an
well,
affirmation or like no.
beliefs, yeah, propositions are apt, but beliefs aren't necessarily truth apt because if I'm saying I'm agnostic, it's a different category. So if I'm affirming a proposition, I'm saying the statement corresponds with the reality. If I'm
Yeah,
negating
sure.
the
So
proposition, hold it, can I
yeah,
finish? If
yeah.
I'm negating the proposition, I'm saying that the statement does not correspond with the reality. If I'm agnostic, all I'm saying is that there is enough, for me personally, there's not enough data on either or side for me to affirm or negate the proposition.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
you
so
can't negate the proposition or affirm it. You can't say anything about the proposition.
yeah, exactly. Like you're uneducated about it, or you just don't have enough like information about
Well,
it,
if you
right?
hold the title of agnostic, right, like I don't know, right, would just
Yeah,
be like the negation of both, right? So you are
exactly.
unsure, right? So if
Yep,
you're not
exactly,
sure, then you just cannot answer this question.
I don't even consider
exactly,
it a
right. So
negation.
that well, it would be a
The
negation of
negation of
affirming
an
or negating.
answer, the negation of
Yeah.
no, the
Okay,
negation of
sure.
yes.
Sure.
Yes, exactly. So, anyways, so going back to the original thing,
Yeah.
right? Based on this kind of conception of what belief and knowledge is, I would say that if I affirm the proposition that God exists, and I have any factual reason or evidence, any piece of data that would make it more true on theism or more likely on theism, then I actually have evidence for God.
I would grant that if there's actually some sort of substantial justification for it. But just because you believe that you have evidence does not mean you actually
Yeah.
do have evidence. That's why I say there is no evidence, because everyone that says they have evidence, they don't. They just have the Bible, or they just have
Mhm.
phenomenal experience.
Exactly.
Look,
So I would say one piece of evidence, right, that I would say, because I'm not just going to say I have a piece of data. I'm actually going to give you one, right? So I would say one piece of data that we do have in the universe that makes it more likely on theism is going to be the apparent fine tuning of physical constants.
Okay.
That's more likely on theism than a. That's not meaning it's now. I'm not saying that it's not likely on
Yeah, I
atheism
know
in
this
any
argument.
respect.
I know this
I'm
argument
just
very
saying,
well. I want to give
yeah.
my response to this argument. I'm going to get sober up, and I want to hear, because I hear this argument all the time. I absolutely hate this argument. I think it's horseshit, and I'll explain why. But I'm going to get sober
same.
up. I'll let SXV give his point, and then I
Okay.
want guys. This guy has been extremely respectful, so I want to give him some linear conversation. Like if he's talking, let's not overtalk him. He's been super fucking respectful. So I want to give my reasoning, but I want to ask you first, are you saying under the idea that this God does exist, it is more likely that under the definition of a God that would have created all these things, it is more likely than in a world without a God that would have made all things?
Yeah, so the proposition I'm
Yeah,
affirming is just going to be like classical theism. So like
sure.
the classical theist God is more likely to exist because of the apparent fine tuning of the universe,
So
the physical
here's my problem with
constant.
this. The definition
Okay.
of this God is that of a God that would have made all these things and did make all these things. The definition doesn't make it actually ontological. So I don't grant that in the first place. And second of all, it is more likely in the wizarding world of Harry Potter for certain things to be true than under atheism or theism. That doesn't make Harry Potter true. So just because in a framework that we make up that this thing by definition is true, or the framework of this thing is true, doesn't mean it's true in our actual world. So I don't grant that at all. It's missing
Okay.
100% of evidence. There's no evidence granting that.
Okay, so like once again, I'm not saying this makes theism true. All I'm saying is that it's
There's
more
no evidence
likely
for it.
on
No, it's
no.
so here's a counter to that as well. In the framework, in the idea that there is this God that made all things, right? If that
Okay.
were true, it would be more likely. But
Hmm.
under atheism, in a world where we have no evidence of a God, which is where we are, there is no evidence for a God. It is more true. So
Well,
you're doing a category error of in this metaphysical framework, it is more likely than in this actual empirical framework. It doesn't
no.
work.
So all I'm doing. So I think you're kind of working backwards from where I'm working. So I think there might just be a misunderstanding of like how where we're working from. So all I'm doing is I'm saying I'm observing this data, and I have these two propositions set before me, or actually this one proposition with two sides, which is that the classical theist God most likely exists. I would assume, I don't want to assume anything like specifically, but I would assume you negate it, and I would affirm it. Correct?
I mean, without any like attributes to said God, I would just stand agnostic, sure.
Okay, so but you would negate the affirmation. Okay. So in that respect, I would say, okay, so in order to get to the data and what the data most likely fits, we actually have to assume each position and see how the data fits within each position. So if we're assuming, and this is what we're doing, so we're actually assuming the negation and the affirmation and then seeing how the data fits in each position in order to get what most likely fits on each worldview. That's why I'm saying it's more likely that the fine tuning and the constants of the universe and the physical constants of the universe fits better with theism than atheism.
Right. So again, but it seems to me, okay, I don't want to straw man. I'm going to try and steel man. You are
Okay.
saying comparing the non God versus the God worldview. In the God worldview, it is obvious that this world would exist and we would exist. In the non God worldview, there seems to be no explanatory power for us actually needing or having a purpose to exist. Therefore, it's more likely for us to exist in the God worldview, correct?
There's not no explanatory power. There's
Well,
some. Like,
sure.
don't get me wrong. Like, I just think it's more likely, it's more probable on theism.
I actually disagree. Um, I'm gonna
Okay.
give you like the physics standpoint, and then I'll also give you like the philosophical standpoint. I'll start with philosophical. If
Okay.
like classical theism, God is like all powerful, all knowing, all whatever, whatever. All you really need is all loving and all powerful. Um, if there's an infinite range of numbers that these constants can fall within, which I'm assuming God is not limited to a range of constants, because he's all
Can I pause
powerful.
you? Do you hold to maximally great or all powerful?
Maximally great.
Okay, cool.
Sure. Is there a difference between those?
Yes,
Yeah.
massively. Yeah, like
Sure,
all
what's the
powerful
difference?
loses to that like rock
I'm actually
paradox.
I'm very glad you asked that question. It's
Sure.
a
You
good
mean
question.
within the laws of logic, all
Within the
powerful?
laws and capacity of the universe and himself to maximally be able to do what he can maximally do.
That's fine.
It's like
So
he
I'm
can't break the laws.
sure. That's fine. So I'm assuming like there's a range of constants that he can like fall within. And the constants, why it seems so finely tuned, is because they're in an equilibrium. It's saying like if you adjust this and adjust that, it won't work. That's not true, by the way. But like, let's just say that for the sake of argument. Um, I think an all maximally good, maximally great God can. There's
Hmm.
much more numbers he can work with that don't fall into equilibrium compared that which of those who do. There's much more numbers that can be disbalanced compared to balanced.
That's valid as fuck. I've never thought of
So,
that.
so when you say like, I'm just interested, right? When you say equilibrium, what are you referring to?
Yeah, so these constants, there's like a certain range that if they're in a constant range that they cannot like waver in. For
Can I
example,
ask
like
another clarifying question? I'm so sorry. What do you
Go
mean
for
by
it.
fine tuning, Lampstand? Do you mean actual tuner, or do you mean the constants being accurate?
So when I was referencing fine tuning, I mean the apparent constants of the universe being in a natural order. So like
Okay,
there's an
just the
order.
accuracy of them.
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
cool, cool,
yes.
cool. Making sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll give you the physics answer after showing that these can actually vary, and it wouldn't be that different. But just like still using philosophical terms, it I don't know why I would expect like there to be an equilibrium. By equilibrium, I mean like if nuclear fusion in stars, if the weak nuclear force was any stronger by like 4% or weaker by 10, stars wouldn't be able to form if gravity is consistent. Um, and that's like a fact. So like, there's a range that these things fall within, but you can mess with these constants. That's the equilibrium, right? All these constants can't move if you mess with one thing, other things can't move unless it's gravity, because then everything will fall out of whack and not work. But an all-powerful God can move all these constants around. And you don't expect an equilibrium under a God. You just expect things to work. And there's a lot more things you can find that work that don't have to find an equilibrium than
Can
that
I
do.
argue for Lamp real quick? I would expect an equilibrium under a god.
Why? If there's more numbers than equilibrium numbers, why is it more expected?
Well, if he's maximally knowing and maximally powerful and great, etc., then he would know that there would need to be some sort of equilibrium for all things to work out.
Well,
Yeah,
the
but
idea of fine tuning is that I agree. The idea of fine tuning is that it has to be these numbers or it wouldn't work. That's just not true. Like you can Fred C. Adams actually wrote a mathematical proof on this. It's like widely accepted. You can increase like the gravitational constant by like I think it's like 100,000 times and decrease it like by a billion times or
Sure,
something like that. And you
but that's still
thing
expected under a maximally smart god.
yeah, all I'm saying is this. Like I'm not saying that like fine tuning is like I'm not going on the offensive and saying fine tuning is improbable or like impossible on atheism. Like I'm saying it can still work. All I'm saying is that it's more likely to be the case under theism, under the way we've defined it. Like it's more probable that the data that we're
In a
seeing with the
metaphysical
fine tuning of
framework,
the universe.
sure, but
Yeah,
oh
that's just a imaginative world where you're making up that this god does exist and does have the attributes of
well,
wanting to make this. It's not
yeah,
real.
but that's the whole point, right? Because what we have to do in order to see if propositions make the most sense for the world around us is to assume they are true and then see how the data fits within it. I would
I
do
don't
the same thing
assume
with
anything.
atheism. True.
well here
I do the
Absolutely
same thing
not.
with. Well, then how
That
do
is
you
not
come
how
to
science
any?
works. You do not assume that it is true.
Well, hold on. So, how do you come to any type of epistemic position then?
By testing it repeatedly with an absolute standpoint of I want to prove this wrong.
No, not just acknowledging that data works and things work in the universe. I'm asking, how do you come to any type of position epistemically
Well, I'm a
if you're not
justified
proposing
skeptic.
things?
So I'm
Okay,
not
what
going
does
to
that
hold
mean?
to anything unless there's evidence justifying it as true beyond reasonable doubt.
Well, you have to make propositions to even come to any type of
Well,
conclusion.
so like think of like gravity with the apple falling on his head, right?
Hmm.
You don't have to assume that there is a gravity. All you have to do is drop it over and over and over, get some different tools, figure out if there's any mathematical formula that explains this in accordance with the sun, moon, and stars, etc. You don't have to assume
Well,
it's true. You just have to be like, okay, why does this work? It's not this works, let me find out why. It's just why does it work?
well, maybe on like the micro level of like specifics, you don't have to assume things, but on the macro level of like epistemology, you do actually have to assume a lot of axiomatic
I'd say
principles.
the only, well, yeah, there's a difference in assuming a proposition versus assuming a axiom. Axioms are self-evident, and it's not even in and of itself just some blameless presupposition. It's justified. For instance, things exist.
Hmm.
It is evidence of itself. This existing is evidence that it exists. It is
Hmm.
observational. Like everything that is axiomatic is in and of itself self-evident, which means that it is the evidence of itself. Nothing is just
Hmm.
blindly presupposed at all. No, 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 no. So when there's some sort of a question or proposition, I'm not assuming it to be true. I'm seeing something that doesn't make sense to me, so I'm going to keep testing it and see what's going on.
So
Yeah.
here,
Oh,
really quickly. So what
yeah.
I'm not, I this might not be an issue, but I want to make sure it's not an issue. What I'm not doing is I'm not doing presuppositional apologetics right now. I'm not trying to do like a presup argument. What I'm trying to do is saying, look, I'm assuming the argument for the sake, I'm assuming the worldview for the sake of fitting the data in the worldview. so that I can see how the data
Why
fits
would I
within
do
each
that for
worldview.
the Wizarding World of Hogwarts? Why would I do that?
Well, you should do that for any type of
No, you
proposed
shouldn't.
worldview.
The Wizarding World of
Why
Hogwarts has
not?
no evidence for it. Just because I'm assuming it's truth and then compare it and contrast it to our actual world, of course it's more likely that magic and wizards exist in that worldview. It doesn't mean it actually exists. That's what I'm saying. This is a category error of making up a metaphysical framework and then comparing it to the actual empirical world. It's stupid. It
Well,
just doesn't work.
Yeah, you
Also,
can't
Lance.
conflate physics with metaphysics.
You can't
well,
at
hold
all.
on. So,
It's 100%
so
category
Yeah,
error.
Lamps. If I may jump in, when it comes to like probabilistic matters, you know, if we like pick a definition or a proposition and just slightly alter it. For example, like you have your all powerful, maximally good,
yeah.
yada yada. I can have a slightly less powerful God that would fit in the same category, and I can do that in an infinite range. So like even if you gain a
Mm,
percentage, like it just falls down to a minuscule amount.
well, no. If you lowered the power of a maximally great God, you would no longer be maximally great.
No,
That's
I'm
just
saying
not
I
the
can
way
have
the
a
data
finite
functions.
God that would fit the same ideals.
No, he actually wouldn't, and
Oh.
I would use different arguments to like show that. But in regards to what we're talking about right now, like what I'm doing, I don't understand why we wouldn't take any type, like even with like the Harry Potter example that you were, or like whatever you were bringing up. Like I first of all, the context of Harry Potter is like supposed to be fictional, so I would assume that
Yeah.
none of us would be taking that as a serious
Why is it
proposition.
fictional? Because none of the physics work. It breaks logic, and it's
Okay.
made up by the mind. Where did
So
God
great.
come
So
from?
but
The
based on
mind.
that, right? So what did you just do there though? You took that proposition and then faced it against reality and said the data doesn't
Yes,
fit with the proposition.
because I
So you
live in
did take the
reality.
proposition. Okay,
I
but
did
you
not
did
assume
just
it
put
as true.
you assumed it for the sake of
I
putting the data
assume my
into it.
actual world is true, and then I look at Harry Potter, and it's obvious that things don't work. I'm not assuming it to be true.
Well,
I'm
right
assuming
there.
what if it was in the actual world, would it work? I'm not assuming it's truthfulness. I'm testing it.
Well, hold on. You're
Critiquing does not
testing
assume
it.
truth.
You can't test something, a proposition, right? You can't test a proposition
Yeah, you
and not
can.
assume it's. Well, hold on, hold on.
Yeah, you
You
absolutely
can't.
fucking can test something and not believe it's true.
I
That's
wasn't
stupid.
finished. I wasn't finished saying you just can't test it flat out. I was going to add context to what I was saying. In reference to the proposition, what did you do? You took the Harry Potter example, worldview, and you said, under the world that we live in, the data does not fit the claims of the Harry
Correct.
Potter world.
No,
So what did you
incorrect.
do? So you didn't say that.
No, I'm looking at Harry Potter, a fictional book written by mankind,
Yeah.
right? And it's metaphysical. And then I'm like, oh, this is cool. Is it possible that there could be wizards in this world? Nope.
Right. The
Okay.
difference that he's doing there is that he's in assuming Harry Potter is true. He's testing it. He's testing the proposition that Harry Potter is giving, and then from that he's making a comparison to reality. He's not assuming
Yeah.
it's true.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's
You-
true. Let me
you-
test its truthfulness. I'm saying, oh, that's kind of cool. Would that be possible? Could it be true? I'm not saying it is true. That's dumb.
But in order to do
No,
any type of
pause.
hypothetical,
Stop. Listen to what I am saying, dude.
I
I
am.
am testing to see if it could even be true. I'm not assuming it is true. Stop.
So
That's
what do you
stupid.
mean when you say? So what do you mean when you say could?
That's
Okay,
stupid.
okay. So look,
Stop with
let
the
me give an
meta.
example. Look, let me give an example. If someone doesn't believe in evolution, they can still test if evolution is real.
By
Belief
doing what?
has nothing to do with testing.
Yeah, you don't have to have
I'm
a
not
belief
saying.
in anything to
Hold on.
test it.
I'm not saying you have to believe in it to test it. That's not what I'm saying. If
You're
that's what
saying
you thought
you
I was saying,
assume
I
it's
apologize.
true. True means you believe in it.
Okay, no. Assume. Okay, when I was saying
Making an
assume, for
assumption
the
is
sake
having the
of
belief or faith that this assumption is in fact true, right? Or is
assuming something is,
confirmed.
I can assume. If I'm talking with like a Muslim, for instance, I can assume for the sake of argument that one of their theological principles is true. That doesn't mean I believe it. That's two different things.
Yeah, I would. If you believe it's true, you believe it. That's why
No.
I'm saying this is stupid. I don't assume shit to be true
You can
unless it's
grant
justified
things.
true.
You can grant things.
Yeah, we
Right? You
grant
could
the
either say for the
that's the
sake.
problem with this whole thing is you're
You're
taking
just being-
metaphysical frameworks and comparing it into an empirical framework.
Yeah.
It just
Assuming-
doesn't work.
Assuming
Yeah.
something to be true for the sake of argument and granting it for the sake of argument are the same thing practically.
Nope. Disagree.
Nope, they're not. No, you can just grant something and
what's
be
the
like, I
difference?
completely fucking disagree with this. But even if I say yes, right, you're right, then you attack another point.
When I'm
Someone
talking
can
to a
say
flat
that
earther,
Jesus
I can
Christ
grant
was
that.
gay. Yes, yeah, someone you can grant to a flat earther that the earth is in fact flat, but how do you account for this? Okay.
Okay.
Like you can just say, sure, I'll agree with your fucking dumbass presupposition or whatever they want to say.
Yeah, I'm
What about
granting
this?
for the
Address
sake
this
of
one.
argument. I'm not granting that it is true.
Yeah. You're not assuming it's true. You're granting it for their
Yeah,
sake.
it's a
For the
metaphysical
sake of the
framework.
argument.
You need to
I don't
learn a little bit
understand
more
what-
empirics.
I don't understand what you guys are having a problem with me saying assuming something for the
Because
sake
belief-
of argument,
belief-
not the sake of worldview.
If you want to say that, that is okay. For the sake of argument, we can grant
I literally
things.
said that.
No, you've been saying we believe and assume that it is true. We are not assuming truth. We are
So
granting things for the sake of
obviously-
argument.
Obviously, when I say assuming something is true, I was referencing it into taking a proposition, like I said before, and taking its affirmation and negation, and then testing the data on each one. So even if you affirm the proposition,
Sure, we
you
can
can
do
still
that.
take the negation.
Just-
Okay, that's what
We
I've been
just
saying
don't like the
this entire time.
semantics. The semantics is what we had a problem with.
Well, I wasn't trying to be semantic. I was actually trying to be pragmatic about it.
The semantic of truth is what we didn't like.
Okay, so assuming the truth of something for the sake of argument is what I said before, but irregardless of that. Anyways, to get back to the point, so all we're doing when we're talking about this data being more likely on theism, is we're saying assuming theism is true for the sake of argument. If we take the data in the real world and apply it to a theistic worldview, and then
Category
we
error.
take the data in the how is that a category error if we're assuming for the sake of
Because you're
argument?
saying in the wizarding world of Harry Potter, it is more likely for wizards to exist, therefore they do. That's stupid. It's a category error. You cannot
No.
compare a metaphysical framework to an empirically true ontological world.
Okay, so once again, we're not talking about the Wizarding World Harry Potter.
Yes,
we're
you
talking
are.
about
You are
theism.
saying, in accordance with the magical universe of a magical unicorn that magically, empirically made things with
I'm talking
zero
about
evidence
unicorns. I'm talking
justifying
about
it,
theism.
it is more likely.
I'm not talking about unicorns. I'm talking about theism.
Yeah, a god, unicorn, Voldemort, all the same thing. So you are
Not the
taking
same
this
thing.
metaphysical, magical world and saying it is true because the book Harry Potter says it's true. Let's compare the likelihood of its truthfulness in comparison to actual world, where in this book it is already true. And then saying because
now-
it's true in the book, it is therefore true.
So now I just feel like you're being disingenuous because theism is obviously not the same thing as unicorns.
No, that's confirmation bias. No, it's the same, right? It's the claim. The basis of the claim is relative to like making the claim of a unicorn. I can claim that a fucking flying dragon dildo that lives in like some abstract realm is the ultimate creator of this universe. It's the exact same claim as saying like a
Oh my
maximally
gosh, but
great
we're not
entity
talking
created
about
this.
unicorns. We're talking
You're not
about
comprehending this at all.
theism. No,
Oh my god,
hold
you're
on.
not understanding the correlation,
Oh my
bro.
goodness.
That's gonna be a
Okay,
tracking error.
It's just
Oh
a
my
category error.
goodness,
It
bro.
genuinely is just a category error.
Listen. I don't care about unicorns and magical rainbows or whatever y'all talking about. I want to address the argument that I'm making about theism.
Yeah, you
So
are
can you guys
talking
please engage
about
with
a
theism,
god.
please?
Yeah, we
what
are.
we
We're
believe
just
to be a unicorn.
No, theism doesn't even posit that, like classical theism.
Does theism
wait,
posit a god?
wait. Does Christianity not talk about unicorns?
That's funny as
Talk
fuck.
about unicorns.
Okay, pause. Does theism talk about a god? Yes or no?
Yes. it's
Does this
talking about
god break the
magically
laws of
creating-
logic and physics? Yes or no?
No.
No? Did he create the universe?
No. Yes.
Did he exist outside of time?
Yes.
That breaks the general law of relativity. So yes, he does break the laws of physics. So yes, I am talking about your god as if it is a fucking unicorn because it is a magical, non-existent bullshit fairy tale.
Wait. If something being outside of the laws of physics is breaking the laws of physics?
Yes.
How
By
can it be
definition.
outside, dude?
Hold on.
Oh my god.
Outside the
Pause.
if some-
Pause. Explain this to me.
goodness.
How is it possible to have causal relation without time?
causal relation without time.
Yep.
You can be non-temporal. I mean, I don't
Demonstrate
see an issue
that.
with
Demonstrate that
logically.
that's even possible. This is special pleading. Your god, your magical unicorn, can do all things. Everything else has to appeal to the laws of physics and logic, except for your thing. This is a special pleading fallacy.
I don't
This
know
is
why
why
you
I'm
keep saying
calling
natural
it
unicorn.
because it is.
It's not.
Yeah, you just admitted that
not.
he exists outside of time, yet reacts with time, which is not even possible.
Oh my gosh, what's the definition of a unicorn?
Explain how it's possible for your magical unicorn to be outside of time and
It's
have
not a
causal
unicorn.
relation.
I'm not going to engage if you're going to call it a unicorn, dude.
Cool.
Why
We'll
does
move
it
on to some. Cool.
Why
We'll
does
move
it
on to someone
matter?
else.